conversation. And after the formal close at 7 p.m., the Zoom link will be open until 7:30 for unrecorded and unmoderated discussion in what we're calling the parking lot. The four agreements that are around courageous conversations are: stay engaged, experience discomfort, speak your truth, and expect and accept non-closure. We would also like to acknowledge the people who have cared for this land for generations before the first settlers arrived. We're meeting, even if virtually, on the ancestral lands of Native nations. In Wisconsin, there are 11 federally recognized Native American sovereign nations, 6 Ojibwe nations, Ho-Chunk, Potawatomi, Menominee, Oneida, the Mohicans, and the Brothertown Indians. We acknowledge these indigenous communities who have stewarded this land through the generations, and we pay respect to their elders, past and present. The topic for today is Beloit's Black History, a best kept secret. And now I turn it over to Amy Levy, who is going to moderate. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Neil. So one quick tip, and then I will get on with the introduction of our speaker. For everyone that is on the call, we are in the Brady Bunch rectangles. If you would like to pin our speaker, which I recommend, you just click. Our speaker this evening, spoiler alert, is Mrs. Linda Hickman Fair. So if you click on her picture, it will give you the option to pin. So if you do that, she will appear larger in your screen, and that will be helpful when she shares her screen. All right. So in February 2017, Linda wanted to share local Black history with our community, both young and old. Since we usually talk about nationally known African American history makers, Linda wanted to showcase our local treasures. With Facebook as her platform, Linda regularly posted, and the amount of interest continued to grow. People shared her post and commented. They were surprised at the history Black people had and have in Beloit. To date, she has presented at the Beloit Public Library in June of 2019. That presentation was filmed for PBS University Place. She has presented at the Beloit Black Women's Expo. She has appeared on WCLO, Stan Milan's show, the Beloit Public Library again this year for Black History Month, and the Rockton Unitarian Church. We are so fortunate to have her with us this evening. Linda, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. First of all, will I be able to share my screen?
Yes, there are two Lindas, and I took a risk, and I made one of them co-host.
Okay, then that was on my iPad. I'm working several different technologies, so
I understand it. I'm here to support you. So okay. I am going to find that other Linda, and I am making you the co-host on that device as well. Quick question, so I won't have to interrupt you again. And I know you broke your presentation up into several sections, which I'm going to drop in the chat just in a little bit, because that might be helpful. Do you want questions throughout, or would you like questions at the end?
There'll be, after each section, there'll be a chance for questions and conversation.
Perfect. So to the audience, we will run questions like we typically do. Just put a question mark in the chat and I will call on you. You can unmute and ask your question of Linda. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Before, I always got a story to tell before I can get going with anything. It's been a day. It's definitely Monday, and it's going to probably be Monday for another 6.5 hours. Please hurry up and be over Monday. So I had to trek into Milwaukee earlier today for a conference. So I was there, supposed to be done at 1. It didn't get over till 2. Ran into traffic getting home. Had a Zoom meeting at 4:30. Get here, find out I left my charger in Milwaukee at UW Milwaukee to my tablet that has my whole life in it. So that's why I'm hoping this doesn't go out. But that's why I got my iPad on backup too. So I'm like, if anything can happen, it will happen. It's Monday, but I would not defeat it. Let it defeat me. One of my past colleagues who I see on here, Beth, knows what we do with Mondays. We have to attack it, quit letting Mondays win. Remember, Beth? So I'm not gonna let Monday win. I'm gonna go ahead and take the victory today, Monday. So stand back, get back Monday. I'm back in full force now. But I just had to kind of lighten the load and just tell if it looks like I'm fraggled, working between this, working between that, and tried to drop some dinner. So it's Monday, definitely Monday. But I do want to thank you all for inviting me. There's several people in the little state line area that I can never say no to. One of them would be Beth Talon. Now I'm finding Amy Levy is one that I won't be able to say no to. Neil Dupree. It's a couple of my favorites that when they call, you just go ahead and accept the charge. There's nothing else you can do about it. Like Amy shared earlier, this was just a little hobby of mine. Um, and it grew and grew, and it kind of ropes you in and sucks you in. And I just really fell in love with finding out all of the information, some that I already knew, and then finding out new information. So I'll be sharing with you today Beloit's Black History, the Best Kept Secrets. And I say it's the best kept secrets because if I didn't tell people, some people would never know. If I didn't dig deep into finding out about it, I don't think I would know either. Shut my door. I wouldn't know anything about it. So it is some of the best kept secrets, but it's all very valuable information. So as Amy mentioned, I'll be doing it in different sections. For Beloit's Black History, we'll talk about the beginning, the Great Migration, education, faith in the Black church, employment opportunities, housing inequalities, healthcare, and Beloit Black History First or Beloit Black History Trailblazers. The beginning. Black history is American history. Morgan Freeman. It all started with the beginning of with the Craig family. And I'm always drawn to this quote by Maya Angelou, who says, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. So I'll be talking to you about Beloit's Black history, some of the best kept secrets in the state. We're going to start with, like I said, Mr. and Mrs. Emanuel Craig. They were the earliest Blacks to settle in Beloit in 1839. He was a coachman and he lived to be 115 years old. Back in 1855, Beloit had 2,753 people, and out of those people, there were only 18 Blacks. The Craigs were among those who witnessed the formation of the township government, the founding of Beloit College in 1846, and all of this was 2 years before Wisconsin achieved statehood. Then there came Joseph Bowling from Raleigh, North Carolina. He was the first bootmaker, the Perry family, the Waffle family, and the Struthers family. John Struthers came from Pennsylvania with upscale white family. He was born to slaves and he traveled here with them to live. And one of the gentlemen he came with, John Riegert, had to go to the army. He chose not to go to the army. He didn't want to participate. And John Struthers volunteered to replace him. Back then, military laws allowed able-bodied men to avoid military service for a commutation of $300 or they allowed another man to enlist in the place of another to compensate them. So that was John Struthers. Any questions before we keep going?
So again, feel free to put a question mark on the chat and I will know to call on you. If you have a question that is sensitive in nature or you would not like your name attached to it, you can also send me a direct message and I will ask your question but not associate your name with it. So there are a couple options.
More of in the beginning, in 1860, there were 4,098 people with only 27 blacks. 1910, the number increased to about 15,000 people with only 60 blacks. Then we get to 1920, where the population became 21,284 with 834 blacks. Now, fast forward to 2020, the city is populated with 15% African Americans. And then, besides the Craigs, like I said, there were other people that came too. The Craigs were one of the main ones that was recognized here. The Great Migration is the next topic, and this is one that really draws a lot of insight, perspective, and it really kind of floors people um, because they didn't really understand this. And to be honest, throughout my K-12 education, I didn't know anything about this Great Migration, rather the Great Migration and how it affected Beloit in the North. I didn't know anything about that because certain things is just kind of, again, the best kept secrets. They're hidden gems right in your backyard. Um, a quote that I have, if you see, is called The Great Migration. May the Lord be the first in the car, she prayed, and the last out. This is a quote by my aunt, Ida Mae Brandon Gladney, who was one of the featured stories in the book Warmth of Other Suns. Warmth of Other Suns is written by Isabel Wilkerson, and she talked to several individuals and their families who traveled here during the Great Migration. And this is one of the quotes that stuck to me from my Aunt Ida Mae. May the Lord be the first in the car, she prayed, and the last out, because they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They were packing, heading north, heading to what they thought was the promised land. Fairbanks Morris and Company experienced a growth in work, but a lack in workers. There was a labor shortage due to World War I. And in 1918, John McCord came to Beloit in 1914, but in 1918, he was sent south in search of a few good men to work at Fairbanks. He made 4 recruiting trips to get people to come back. They um they really didn't know what they were getting themselves into. John was a custodian for Fairbanks, and the one of the upper management guys was like, we really could use a few good men. And John's like, I know where I could get a few good men from. And he's like, where? He's like, back home where I'm from. He said, I know there's some good men down there that would love to come and work. Each of these people were coming, seeking greater change, greater prosperity for their family. Um, they were just looking again. They thought the promised land was north. So they were heading north. They didn't have any idea. He made several trips down to recruit, taking life chances, life risking chances that he was taking. And he got people to sign up, got them on board to come north to Beloit. So this is when we get to the good part. All these men, they join, they're getting on, they're taking what they have with them, because the plan was to come, check things out, get employment, and send for their family. So they hop a train heading north. That's all they knew, they were heading north. So the train conductor pulls into Beloit and he goes, Beloit, 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 no one is moving. Beloit. And he's looking back like, now I know they said these people were coming to Beloit. Finally, he says, Fairbanks. And all the guys jumped up. They're like, oh, they didn't know anything where they were going. All they knew was Fairbanks. They didn't know the name of the city, wherever they knew that they were headed to Fairbanks. And that's when they all got up and emptied the train. They had no idea what the name of the city was, but they knew it was Fairbanks. They knew there was a labor shortage. Work was still there. So they knew that they had to get off at that time. Most of the people that were on that train hailed from Pontotoc, Mississippi, Houston, Mississippi, some other smaller towns back south. And it got to be so overfilled with people from Pontotoc, they decided to call Beloit Pontotoc North. And there's still so many family members and that are still here that came, offspring of those that first came during the Great Migration. um, when he um, when he left, they said, "Well, we need about 18 good men," and 18 turned into 36, and 36, so it kept doubling. So he kept making trips back and forth, and finally, another gentleman, Walter Ingram, decided to join him on these trips too. The trips kept getting more and more scary though, because they started. There was word traveling through the South that people from the north was heading south to recruit for good men, which means they were taking their laborers. So that, which was a bad deal for them. So they started threatening John McCord, threatening Walter Ingram. They were shot at. They witnessed lynchings, um, just so many different disasters that they faced until finally they decided after about 5 or 6 trips that that was going to be it because they couldn't no longer risk their lives just to save other people's. Um, it was treacherous, they said, because they were faced with those labor laws. They kept getting stopped by people. Just a real tough time for them. But by this time, they had well enough laborers. People started bringing their families. So here comes the problem: like, where are they going to stay? Where do we put them? We have these people here. We got them here. We got the laborers. They're working for us. What do we do? And that's how Fairbanks Flats was built. Fairbanks Flats, for those of you from Beloit, is still in existence over on Shore Drive behind the Rock Bar and Grill. A few years ago, it was declared a historical landmark, so it's listed in the historical sites registry thanks to a group of Fairbanks Flats revitalization groups such as Wanda Sloan, Lula Mae Brown. She's deceased now, but some of those, they fought really hard because this was a part of our history. Riding by there, I sometimes get chills. I never lived there or anything or had a family member, but just knowing why those were built and the purpose that it serves, it just kind of gives you chills. They've been redesigned and revamped and modernized now, but they're apartment complexes, but they're still in existence. Now, after the Great Migration, um, by 1970, you know, things still weren't as peachy keen as they thought it should be. There was still discrimination, still poor working conditions, segregation. The civil rights movement had taken place. So it's still, granted, it was a better life, but it wasn't the best life. So that, so you had to kind of weigh your options. Do I want better, best, or what am I going to settle for? So that's how people toughed it out and made it happen up here. By 1970, when the Great Migration ended, its demographic impact was unmistakable. Whereas in 1900, 9 out of every 10 Black Americans lived in the South, and 3 out of every 4 lived on farms. By 1970, the South was home to less than half of the country's African Americans, with only 25% living in the region's rural areas. And this has always been interesting to me. So people left the South, migrated north, brought their families, looking, again for a brighter day compared to what they have been experiencing. So they come here, they work at Fairbanks, they work at Ironworks, their family is raised here. Some of those people worked at the later General Motors, Chrysler. They retire and go back south. They retire and then they go back south because that's still home to them. Um, Granted, stuff might have changed a little. There's probably still certain situations happening, but that's home to them and that's where their roots are. So what they do, they build their life up here and transition and go right back south. And these are several generations later, but they do they have the tendency to go back home. Part of the reason I am here is because my family was part of the Great Migration, as I mentioned about my Aunt Ida May. But my maternal grandfather was one of the ones that came during the migration, and he came to work at what was then the foundry, Ironworks, the foundry, and he brought along his family, which was my mom included. She was 8 years old at that time. And then he also had his brothers. After he got here, you send back for your family. So his brother came up, and then another brother came. So when they did come, they lived in the same house. Because that's what families do. They work together, they live together. But as a funny story, as always, they were two different families, but it was under the same roof. And so with them kind of each doing their own thing, my mom told me that they had separate supper times. So her family, would eat at a certain time, and then my grandfather's brother and his family would eat at another time. Well, guess who ate twice? My mom. She ate with both families. And if you know her, that's funny. You got to laugh at her when you see her again. But that was funny. She's like, I joined in with both families. She wasn't missing a meal, in other words. But that's exactly what families do. They work together. And then again, going back to Fairbanks Flats, they had to do something because they promised them housing, they promised them jobs. So that's when they put together the Fairbanks Flats. But then get this, they were like, now that we have them all here, how can we control them? Those are the type of words. How can we control them? They wanted to make sure that they kept them together, kept them in their neck of the woods. How can we control them? So they ended up bringing in J.D. Stevenson from North Carolina, and he was like their superintendent or like their manager. He managed them, but he did help put in place some recreational activities. The Edgewater YMCA became their hangout, and tried to get them involved in some type of activities instead of looking for trouble or getting into some trouble. Any questions, comments, cares, concerns?
So Linda, I don't have a question, but thank you for the slide that had both Pontotoc and Houston on it. My mother was born in Chickasaw County, and both of my parents are from Manatee, which is about 30 minutes from Houston. So yes, always good to see. Definitely feels, even for me, born and raised in Rock County, but Mississippi definitely feels like home.
Exactly. And that's why I think people go back. That's, again, like I said, it's their roots, it's their heritage, and you go back to what you came from and what you know.
So Beth has a question. You mentioned J.D. Stevenson. So was the supervisor they brought in Black?
J.D. Stevenson was not Black.
Very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I made a noise and so Zoom wanted me to unmute because I made such a noise. I thought I was trying to talk into the microphone. But thank you.
Linda, I've got a question.
Okay.
If I don't get muted.
Hi, Santo.
I know a couple of years, well, more than a couple of years ago, there was a big push in Beloit to restore the flats because it's a piece of history.
Right.
Can you share with us how they have been restored and if they are open now to the public or how they're being used?
Yes, good question, Santo. So they, like you said, that was the Fairbanks Flats Revitalization Group. One of the main ones I remember, like I said, was Wanda Sloan, and then there were a couple older people that really fought for that. So because at one time they were going to tear it down. So based on the research, the history that they pulled and, fought and going to the city council, state, they were able to save it. So now Fairbanks Flats are single family apartments, 2 and 3 bedrooms, open to the public. Something that came from my last presentation, I want to check in and see if they're willing to do any tours for maybe some of the empty units, because some people have really reached out into saying they would love to kind of see how they've revamped them. So they're open to the public, 2 and 3 bedroom units.
If I could make a comment on some of that current status.
Okay.
Gorman Corporation partnered with the city of Beloit to do the renovation and to open it up. It was supposed to be a pathway to home ownership, which it has drastically failed on. It's got a lot of problems. The renters that are currently there, a lot of complaints about what is going on in terms of the services they get or what they don't get. There was supposed to be classes done by Home Depot or some more entity like that to help them understand what it takes to be a homeowner, and they were supposed to get a certain amount of credits, financial credit for that in terms of their rent to build up so that they could eventually buy the unit that they're in. That has not happened at all. So that aspect of it has been kind of sad to see.
Wow. So does that fall back on Gorman, or is that a city thing, you think, Neil?
In my opinion, it falls mostly back on Gorman. However, the city, in my opinion, also has not been aggressive on holding Gorman to their initial pledges and the tax credits that Gorman was given to incentivize their doing the renovation.
Thank you, Steve. And I see that Vicky posed a question to Ms. Sloan. I'm not sure if Ms. Sloan is on the call. Oh, you are. If you would like to unmute and jump in, it says, please correct me. Are the flats 1 or 2 remaining examples of company housing in the country?
Is Wanda coming?
Is Wanda on that?
She is. I just put her on the spot.
Speak up, Wanda.
I know it's 1. I'm not for sure if there's another one, but I do know that it's, 1. It might be 1 of 2, but I know it's definitely, it's very limited company housing still that exists.
Yeah, Amy, you put me on, Amy, you put me on the spot, but it is 1 of 2. I believe the other one might be in Indiana, but I'm not sure. But that was one of the ways that we were able to get historical designation, because there were only one of maybe 4 initially, but most of them have been destroyed. So we're very fortunate to have the historical designation for the flats.
Ms. Sloan, you came through for me as usual. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, Linda. I love it.
Thanks. Okay.
This is Wendy Tupper, and I have a quick question on the gentleman that was brought up to, I'm not sure how you put it exactly, but control the people that had located to Beloit to work. What was his background? You said he was white. So what was his background, and how did he get along with the people?
I don't know all those details, and I'm not for sure. I'm thinking it was like people that know with from Fairbanks. I think someone knew someone and reached out to him because he came from South Carolina, so there had to be some type of connection. But they did, and all the stuff that I've read, I haven't found any other direct information on that.
And of the workers at Fairbanks Morris, then what percentage were Black?
During that time.
Yes.
I'm not for sure the exact percentage, but I do know that it was well over 25% based off the numbers that came in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Linda. And if everyone can remember, if you do have a question, go ahead and put that question mark in the chat. Because if you don't, I might mute you because we want to keep everyone who's not asking a question muted so we don't hear background conversations. So go ahead and throw a question mark in the chat, and then I will know that you need to ask your question for Linda. All right, Linda, you want to move on to the next section?
Amy, if I could make one more comment on the purchase of the Fairbanks Flats and the creation of it. That was done as kind of an end run by Fairbanks Morris. The city, once they found out where they were going to put these workers, they didn't want them in the city. They wanted them way further north. And they decided, oh, we're going to make a park there. And Fairbanks Flats managed to do kind of an end run about it. But there was a whole lot of fuss and bother and discrimination in that whole setup that is a
Thank you. Yes, and I'll speak more of when I get to the housing inequalities with how they tried to corral the Blacks to certain parts of the city as well. Next topic will be education. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, as mentioned by Nelson Mandela. People who came up from the South, they had maybe, if anything, second or third grade level education or any education at all. But they knew one thing for sure: they wanted their offspring and their families to get education because they figured that would be the ticket to becoming successful and getting, what you need. So that was one of the main things that they really, really felt confident about. And even still, that same feelings and those thoughts really transfer over even now with the new millennium or whatever. Families that haven't, you see, I work with college students, so I see a lot of first generation students. Their families didn't go, but their parents want them to get that education because, again, they figure that is a vehicle to get them ahead in life, further on jobs, and it's what's best for them and their families. So they felt that it was the route to success. With education, want to talk about the Owsley family, Grace Owsley and Lawrence Owsley. Both of these, the Owsley family lived over at 731 Church Street over by Beloit College. She was the first Black to graduate from Beloit High School. That was before it became Beloit Memorial High School, and that was in 1900. And then she went on to Beloit College and graduated from there in 1904. She was the first Black to graduate from Beloit College in 1904. She ended up getting her going on to teach at an orphan school in Illinois until her death 1908. So that was only 4 years after she graduated from college. Her brother Lawrence was attending Beloit College at the same time, and he never did graduate from Beloit College, but he chose to work instead to help provide for his family. So he worked a job at Beloit.
I think we may have temporarily lost our host. No worries. I am sure, here we go. I am sure she will join us shortly. so we'll just take a brief break. But if you are thinking about questions, please feel free to either type those or throw a question mark in the chat, and then I'll know who to call on when we restart. All right, while we wait for Linda, I'm going to call an audible. My two teammates, feel free to jump in as well. We're going to go ahead and do announcements real quick, which we usually save for the end, but Linda probably just had to switch to a different device. So while we give her a minute to do that and rejoin, let me share my screen because there is an opportunity that I want to tell you about. All right. So this Thursday, as we continue to celebrate Black History Month, the YWCA Rock County will be hosting the HBCU Roundup. So it's going to be held Thursday, February 25th. So in a couple days from 6 to 7:30 p.m. via Zoom. And what we are going to do is hear from local students, local former students, who attended school in Beloit, who went on to college at HBCUs. For those of you who are not familiar, HBCUs are historically Black colleges and universities. And we are going to hear how these amazing graduates are serving, some of them in our local community, and a couple that are going to be on the call that are serving in communities across the country. So that is going to be a fantastic opportunity. I will stop sharing my screen. I'll pull the link and I'll drop that in the chat. But while we're waiting for Linda, Beth, or Neil, if you have any updates that you would like to share, or if anyone has any questions about the HBCU Roundup, I would be happy to answer those for you. Beth?
All right, Community Action is going to be offering rental assistance soon for households that are impacted by COVID-19. We do not have the details. It will be similar yet different from the WRAP program that we had earlier in the pandemic. So this is something that we have a lot of requests for. We have people honestly, on a daily basis, we have people asking for rental assistance. So if you know somebody who needs rental assistance, or if you have a way that you'd like to share that information, it will be on our website and it will also be on our Facebook page. The first step that people can do now, while we're waiting to hear about what type of rental assistance will be available, is filling out an energy assistance form. So if you do a 2021 energy assistance application with the state, you're going to need to do that anyway if you apply for rental assistance. So while we're waiting to hear more, that's what you need to do. And I can drop a link in the chat too.
Thank you, Beth. That would be perfect. Neil, do you have any announcements for us from DAT?
Just want to remind people that our March DAT meeting is Thursday, the 18th at 6:30 p.m. And Jean Carfora is on this Zoom, and so I'll ask her to tell us what the topic is.
We're pleased to be able to present The Color of Money, Racism in Housing and Employment Employment Policy. And our own Vicki Brown and Wanda Sloan will be sharing their experiences, their insights from FHA loans, that time period, and how it directly affected many of the Blacks who were hoping to get loans for education and for housing. And so we will be hearing from some of our Beloit friends, and that will be a reality check too. So we're really looking forward to this program.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Jean.
So we are going to make excellent use of our time during our brief intermission while we wait for Linda to rejoin us to continue her fantastic program. We've heard updates from YWCA Rock County, Community Action, Diversity Action Team. If you have any questions or comments, you can throw a question mark in the chat and we'll address that. So for any of our 3 organizations.
Maybe somebody has an announcement that they'd like to make of a program that they're aware of that people might be interested in.
Amy, am I unmuted?
You are. Go right ahead.
I don't know how to raise the question. So anyway, I couldn't figure out, the options weren't questions. So for the March thing, and Ron Watson is part of it also, but it's like, so government policies built the middle class, and government policies left out the Blacks intentionally. That's what the program is. And it's Wanda, myself, and Ron Watson, and Cameron. What's Cameron's last name, Jean? I forget. But anyway, that's what the program is. Is Linda back?
Not yet.
Okay, in the event that Linda is not back, you know, I'm gonna show my whiteness. I was born in Beloit in 1958. My father, who I'm out in Arizona with right now, is 90 years old, and he moved to Beloit in 1954. And I asked him today, did he know who Barb Hickman was? And he did not. And I am embarrassed to say, I did not know who she was until I started volunteering with the YWCA Racial Justice Program. So when we talk about the difference between the whites and the Blacks growing up in Beloit, I'll take a cop out that I moved out in 1976 and just moved back. But anyway, that's my 2 cents in this courageous conversation. And she's an icon, Linda Fair's mother. And my father just learned of her today, and I unfortunately just learned of her when I started at the YWCA. So.
Vicki, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you being transparent. I see that there is a question in the chat that has been asked and answered. Thank you, Beth. But I would just like to add one point. Yes, the Soul Food Luncheon sponsored by Beloit Technical College for tomorrow is sold out. I'm going to rub it in a little bit because I ordered 3 meals early. So I'm excited to pick those up at 11. But please do remember that the focus of that luncheon is to help for scholarships for minority students. So I am certain, I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for BTC, although I have no affiliation, that they will accept donations. So if you really wanted to participate in Soul Food Luncheon, I believe they capped it at around 250 people. It's all curbside this year. I am certain that a donation in any amount will be happily received. So if you are able, please keep that as an option. Thank you. Are there other community members? When we were getting started and everyone was logging on, I believe that Representative Sheila Stubbs, if I'm wrong, please correct me, is presenting tomorrow. If someone has information on that, if you could drop the link to how we can register in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated.
Carol Salinas, do you have that?
Yes, I put it in the chat.
Thank you.
AAUW is hosting Representative Sheila Stubbs tomorrow night at 7 p.m. She'll be speaking on conversations with a Black woman, and from her perspective as a Black woman, her feelings about racial injustice. So in the chat is my email address, and you can send an email to me and I will send you the Zoom link.
Thank you so much for including that. So we're going to do a quick tutorial because it looks like there's lots of good information in the chat. If you look down to the bottom right corner of your screen, there is a rectangle that says file, and next to that, there's a square with 3 white dots. Don't do it now, and I'll tell you why you shouldn't do it now in a minute. But Before you exit the meeting, you want to click on those 3 white dots, and that first option at the very top says Save Chat. So that's going to download all of that valuable information and resources that people are putting into the chat. Thank you for everyone who is doing that, onto your computer. Okay. The reason you don't want to do that now is because whenever you hit Save Chat, it's not going to save anything that happens after that, only everything that happened from the time you logged in up until the point that you saved. Okay. So remember to do that before you log off. And the other disclaimer is when you open that file, it is going to look like it was compiled by a robot. No worries. You're going to highlight all of it and you're going to copy it and put it into a document that you're comfortable with. For me, I just toss it into a Word document and keep it highlighted. And you can always change the font. You can make it big or small. And it's a really nice resource list. So just a little hint there.
I'm very glad that Ms. Wanda Sloan corrected me that there is a second soul food luncheon, which is wonderful. Also, Linda is working on getting back in. I'm working on that right now with her.
Perfect, Beth. Thank you so much. All right. So if anyone doesn't have their chat open, thank you, Ms. Sloan, for the comment. It says BTC Soul Food Luncheon sold out for tomorrow. However, there is another one on Sunday hosted by the Rebecca chapter. So Linda Ward had the information and cost is $10. Ms. Sloan, I'm going to put you on the spot for the second time in one meeting. I will owe you. Feel free to let me know when you're ready to collect. Who do people need to contact? I know you have Linda Ward. I'm assuming they're doing pre-orders. Where can food be picked up? Do you have any other details?
Yes, let me run to the other room as fast as I can. Let's see.
Ms. Sloan, you're the best.
I try to be so quiet on these things. I hate to get, okay, anyway. Sunday, February 28th from 1 to 3:30 at the new location for the W.B. Kennedy Lodge on Liberty Avenue. Carry out. Now, unfortunately, Linda didn't put a phone number on this flyer, but I can get that for you later. But it's turkey and dressing, chicken, ham, homemade desserts, greens, peas, yada, 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 all that good soul food stuff. So that's Sunday from 1 to 3:30 at the W.B. Kennedy Lodge, 2034 Liberty Avenue, and it's carry out.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sloan. And the good news for those of you that were furiously writing is that Beth is amazing at getting our recordings up very soon after I emailed them to her. So if you were not able to capture all that, no worries, because my friend Beth is going to make sure that our recording is up on Community Action's YouTube page. I'll get that sent over to her tonight. And I was going to edit out all of this time while we were waiting for Linda to rejoin. But it sounds like a lot of great announcements have happened. So I will go ahead and keep our recording in as it happened. And Beth, thank you in advance for getting that up. So know that you can use this recording as a resource and jot down all that information if you are interested in placing a lunch order.
Wanda, do you have to make a reservation for the Rebecca Soul Food Lunch?
Well, I would imagine, Neil, I would imagine simply because they did the flyer, which I'll send out to you later, Amy. I did not see any accommodations, let's say, for social distancing. In other words, eating inside like we normally do every year. So I would imagine the orders should be taken ahead of time. And again, I'll get that number before this is over and send that out to you all so you can order if you'd like.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Beth, hopefully Linda is still working to get back to us. Jean, you are next to be put on the spot only because I love you. And Vicky, you know how I feel about you. Love you too. So please feel free to jump in. What additional information do we need to know about the DAT March program, The Color of Money? I'm super excited about it. Give us a teaser while we're waiting.
Well, I put in a couple of books that I think would really be beneficial in learning more about the Black situation. And yeah, I'm just really, really impressed by both of those authors. And Vicki, it is your turn because you may want to share one of the teasers that you have that you're sharing at that program.
Well, I'm still working on it. But again, as I said earlier, the middle class was started and formed and shaped by government policies in the 30s, 40s, 50s, with reconciliation of sorts in the 60s. And they specifically, in writing, left out African Americans. And we're doing the research on, the FHA, VA, and then locally. I've chatted with a few local folks, and both housing, it's housing and employment. So that's about it.
Vicki, that was perfect. Thank you to everyone who gave all of these wonderful resources and announcement. Linda has rejoined us and I have made her co-host. Linda, welcome back. We spent the time well, and we are ready to pick back up if you are.
Yes, I am. Not for sure if my PowerPoint's going to show, but if you don't mind just having this casual conversation.
No, that's fine. It only if you would like. If you email it to me, I can present it on my screen. If that is going to be too much of a hassle, we trust.
Yep, I can do that. I can do that. Again, thanks, guys. I'm really like going through anxiety overload. This is so unlike me. Of course, if you know me, I just do better usually than this. But technology, you can't live with it. You can't live without it. But I appreciate, and I just sent that to you.
I'm going to get that pulled up, but let me reassure you, you are perfectly fine. We used our time well. We gave some updates, shared some community resources. So no worries. You pick up and I'll get this on screen as soon as I can.
Okay, great. Again, thanks again, guys, from waiting patiently for me. And I think when you're moving fast, nothing works when you're trying to get it to go. But hopefully that kind of, like I said, clarifies some things up with the Fairbanks Flats and then with JD Stevens. But all of these have been good questions, stuff that I could look further into too, and be glad to maybe rejoin you at another time or get the information to Amy to share with you with some of the questions that I don't have. So just know I don't act like I'm the know-it-all type, but I do try my best to put forth a good effort. So back with education, and we were talking about the Owsley. So Lawrence Owsley never did finish his time at Beloit College, although he worked to help take care of his family and worked to help pay his way through Beloit College, but he never did complete it. But they were very appreciative for his hard work and effort. And there's even a building in South College named after Grace Owsley. And there in the new powerhouse, there's a room named after Lawrence Owsley. It was so nice to know that he continued to give back to the school and worked, and that they thought enough of him to recognize and pay that homage to him. When I did this presentation at the library, some of them were floored to know that that's where he retired. He worked all those years at Beloit Public Library. So it's almost like it made a full circle coming back when I did the presentation and talked about the Owsley family.
Most of the, again, like we were talking about, corralling the African Americans, keeping the Black community together. Most of the African Americans attended a school called Strong School. Strong School is no longer open or in existence, but 95% were African American, because schools were considered neighborhood schools. So they had to attend the school in their neighborhood. And this school was over like in the Park Avenue, Bushnell area, similar to the Rock County Christian School right now. And most of the African Americans lived south of Broad Street, I guess you would call it, in the Keith Street area, Booker Street, over by Turtle Creek, and some of those areas. So they were housed at Strong School. But get this, they weren't able to be in the classrooms with the other Caucasian students. They were in like a portable, like a little trailer you see sometimes now on some of the school grounds. They were in what's called a portable. They had to still be taught by all white staff, but they often felt ignored and overlooked because the teachers didn't look like them, didn't understand them, and was just really there to do their job or to get a paycheck type of deal. The school closed in 1964, Strong School did. You could change it. Okay, I don't know why. So that takes us up to another round of education. The first African American to become teacher in the school district of Beloit was Carolyn Bolton. And her husband, Clarence Bolton, was the first African American mail carrier. Carolyn started out as only being able to substitute as a sub teacher before they finally hired her on permanent as a teacher. Next is another familiar face some of you may recognize, and my shero, if I wouldn't mention her, it would be something wrong with me. But Barbara Hickman, who also attended Strong School, she came back and was a teacher at Strong School, third grade teacher at the school that she went to as a little girl. She was the first African-American female to graduate from UW-Stevens Point. And upon graduation, she graduated at the top of her class, really was stellar, had high hopes of becoming a third grade teacher. One of her first interviews was with Madison Metropolitan School District. And at that time, it was like a panel of interviews, and there were several other white females that interviewed for the same position. And they pretty much told her, you would almost have to be triple good to be hired. You were really good anyhow, but based on the color of your skin, we won't be able to hire you. So that's when she was thankful and appreciative to her home city, Beloit, reaching out saying, yes, they'll hire her, gave her an interview. She got hired as a third grade teacher because that's her famous line. When she left to go to college, all she wanted to be was a third grade teacher. So she became a third grade teacher, fifth grade teacher, transitioned into being Title I director, reading teacher, and administrator, principal. She was a long-term principal at Burge Elementary School for over 27 years. Did great things with that school. They got Title I national recognition, Lifespan Awards, numerous recognitions. And guess who called her? Madison. Now that they're seeing your name in the paper, it's granted it's 30, 40 years. The people at that time had no idea, but she never did forget. She never forgot how Madison did her. And she told them, she said, there's not enough money that you guys could pay me to come work for Madison. You had your opportunity to get me and you didn't take advantage of it. Granted, that was before probably their time, but she still stuck to her guns at no, I won't be able to. And they were willing to give her 6 figures and all types of stuff. And these are stories that I think young people need to know, because sometimes we let money get our attention when sometimes you need to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So if you don't stand for your own self and you know what you believe, again, like I said, granted, this was way before this era when these people were hiring or looking, but she still stayed on it like, no, I won't be coming. I'll stick with what's been there for me, and that's the school district of Beloit. And after about 58 years, she's officially retired. I mean, she has like 3 retirements under her belt, but her only employer has been the school district of Beloit. I've worked 1,000 different jobs, it feels like, for 17 different companies. And her famous line is, I only applied for one job, and that was to be a 3rd grade teacher. She's one that says, let your work speak for itself. And people were approaching her. How about this? I think you'll be good at that. She also tells stories of how she felt offended on both sides. Blacks thought she was too good. Whites didn't think she was good enough. And it's just, you know, we sometimes can be our own worst enemy, African Americans. She tells a story of a meeting that they were having at middle school. This was back in the 70s. And she said, you know, that's when like the Black Teacher Caucus, Black personnel group, people that were about education and trying to see progress, they were having a meeting. So she had got word that there was going to be a meeting. So she tiptoes in after, you know, her long day, sitting towards the back, and find out the meeting was there to talk about her. That she was thinking she was an Uncle Tom type and all of this other stuff. And she said when she talks, if you notice from me, I talk with my hands a lot. So when she found out that the meeting was about her, she said she literally had to sit on her hands so she wouldn't say something that could really be hurtful or harmful to her career or anything. But who caught a glimpse of her as she was getting ready to stand up and say one thing was the good old Reverend Dr. Floyd Prue Jr. And he, you know, kind of caught that. They made eye contact, and she said she sat down for a second and then she ended up leaving. But she said she had never been so hurt in her life. Here she is battling against whites, and now you got to battle against your own people too. So, I mean, this is history and this is what it is. And sometimes it repeats itself. This type of stuff still happens and you're just feeling like you're on your own island. But nevertheless, she persevered. She, you know, kept fighting or whatever. And people finally recognized that, oh no, she is down for the cause too. But it's just some of the things that she had to go through. She has served in every building in the school district of Beloit in some capacity. She was principal at 2 schools at the same time. So again, let your work speak for themselves. So I'll get off that soapbox because if you can tell, I can talk about my mom all day. For those who didn't know, I'm the younger daughter of Barbara Hickman. If you didn't know who she was, you can go next. Any questions? Now that we already had the little intermission, but I'll still take some questions in regards to like the education, anything that you remember from growing up in Beloit, anything, I'm open.
I will just say this, Beth, I need you to tag in. Since I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat. So please continue to drop the question mark in the chat. If you have a question that you want to direct message, please send that to Beth. She's also one of our co-hosts, and she will field that to Linda. So Beth, thank you in advance for helping me out.
I'm here for you. Okay, Thomas Holmes wants to know, how long were the portables at Strong School?
I'm not for sure, but well, I think up until they closed, because I know my mom mentioned when she started teaching there, they still had the portables. And she was teaching 3rd grade at that time. And she mentioned that it was strange for some of her students to finally have an African-American teacher, and some of those students, they're still alive. She's had their kids. I think she was on her like 5th generation when she finally left, but not for sure. But I know up until like 64 for sure.
Okay, not a question, but Mrs. Carfora says, hooray for Barbara Hickman. You're the best. Exclamation point, all caps. Just so you
Oh,
know.
thanks, Jeannie. Yes.
And then Susan Adams has a question.
Yes, do you know anything about the area that is on the other side of Strong Stadium over by,
Booker Street and Keep Street.
yes.
Yes, yes.
And there was there's like a historical marker for a doctor, I think, there.
Yeah, the park, Dr. George Hilliard Park, which is Hilliard Park is named after Dr. George Hilliard, graduate of Beloit College. Opened up a doctoral practice downtown Beloit some years ago. And that's who that park is after, and that marker that's down there by the pavilion area is named after him. Thank you too, Amy. I guess I have to call you my Vanna White, Amy. What else could we do coming up from the South? We've left our homes, we've left our families, we've ventured into new territories. Here's a quote from Janelle Gray. She said, back then, Black churches were a small piece of peace. Church was a world where even with its imperfections, the offer of equality and common humanity was the sustenance needed to make it through the rest of the week in a society that deemed them less than human. And that's how they felt back then. And that still holds true. You'll hear, come worship sometimes at an African-American church, you'll hear people say, if I couldn't wait to get here on Sunday. I just couldn't wait to get to Sunday. If I could only make it to Sunday, they felt that was just enough refuge, safety. You get to the church and be able to pray and sing songs and worship and fellowship. If you could make it to Sunday, it felt like the whole world was going to be okay. You can turn it, Amy. The Black church has always served as a religious and social center, especially back then. They didn't have many activities aside from what was going on with the YMCA and those recreational activities. They heavily relied on their faith. It stood as a safe haven. Blacks have always been firm believers in God and the power of prayer. Throughout time, the Black church stood as a stronghold of the Black community, fighting for equality and economic self-sufficiency. And that's how it still is to this day. It's just, like I said, that safety net. If I can make it to church, have a direct connection with God, I know he'll see us through. He's been there before, he's done it again, if I could just make it to church. So we know that's one of their strong beliefs in is their faith. The oldest Black church in Beloit is still standing. It's Bethel AME Church. Now, at the time of this presentation, this was like 3 or 4 years ago, I put this together. It was 136 years. So it's close pretty much to 139 years or so right now. The Baptist faith was formed shortly after, and that was when Emmanuel Baptist Church was formed. And a few months later, New Zion Baptist Church was both organized. And several years ago, they both recently celebrated 100 years of their 100-year anniversary. Again, those are safety nets in our town still to this day. I grew up under the pastorship of Reverend Floyd Prue Jr., and he was big on community, being out there, helping people. Emmanuel has had free hot lunch programs, tutoring sessions. Both New Zion, they have, they're big on like their education and economic status. But again, it's just bringing people together. They get to church and they feel that they're safe. That's their safety network. They're going to lay it all on the altar. They're going to leave it all there, walk back out and be ready to face the week coming for them. And then again, let me get right back to church on Sunday. That's where, was their stronghold. That's how some of the Negro spirituals and hymns, those are things that got them through cotton fields when they were picking, got them freed when they were slaves. When you hear them say, I know the Lord, he heard my cry. If I could sing, I would have sang it for you. But I know the Lord, he heard my cry. That's what they were, they know that he was listening, and they really felt compelled to give God all the praise and grace. Any questions? Comments, cares, concerns?
We do have a question in the chat. And I think this has come up a couple of times. So the question is, over our conversations, the question is posed as, would whites be welcome at a Black church service?
Yes. From past and present, they were welcome. And, there were some that chose to worship then, worship with the Baptist faith or the Methodist faith even back then. And now they're more than welcome to come and participate, come and join us. I invite you to choose any church of your choice. You don't probably want to ask me, I'm a little biased since I'm a member of Emmanuel, but any church will be more than glad to have you. And we have Caucasian members at our church. So there was no discrimination going on that part, and it still isn't. People are welcome to come. It's a different service probably from what you may be used to or familiar with, but come, we serve the same God.
I can speak to that personally. A few years back, I was attending different Black churches in Beloit practically every Sunday. And every time I was warmly welcomed, and oftentimes, because I'm a pastor, oftentimes invited up to sit in the pulpit alongside the pastor. So the answer is enthusiastically, yes, you are welcome.
Okay, Neil, since this is called Courageous Conversations, like 4 or 5 years ago, when it was Mark Perry, you and I doing this, we had ministers come in for a series of Courageous Conversations. Wasn't filmed, but do remember, and I'm going to put him on the spot, even though he's not here, Mark saying, and Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, that you can go to a Black church and you'll be welcomed every Sunday, but by the third time you come, this is Mark saying this, you'll be questioned, what are you doing here? Come on, it's Courageous Conversations. Remember Mark saying that?
I don't remember Mark saying that, and it never happened to me. Now, they may have thought that, but
yeah, no, I don't think so, because I think when they come back, we're glad to see you return. That means we didn't scare you off with our length of service. We didn't, any of that other ways that we praise and worship. So feel free to come as many times as you want. And I don't think you'll be looked down on or frowned upon. Again, this is how we strengthen the relationships cross cultures. You have to get to know each other and start to feel comfortable to go on those places that you would feel less comfortable. And as from us, we have to be more accepting and open, because we always say if they knew better, they do better. So if you don't know and you trying to come learn and get some understanding, we have to be, we have to welcome that.
Yeah. One of the things that I would add, Linda, you're doing a great job. Amen. Keep preaching. But as a minister, like I grew up under the ministry of Dr. Floyd Prue Jr. also. One of the things, and just kind of combining two of the things that Linda talked about, one, education, thinking about the many educators that we grew up with in our church. And then even as Linda makes this presentation, because she's just a little bit older than I am, but that in our church family, the way that, each generation of kids encouraged the other group coming behind them. So I'm very proud of Linda as she makes this presentation. But then also into the idea of, race and ministry. I remember, as a younger man and a 18-year-old there in that time frame when Reverend Dupree would come and join us. And from the outside, say, hey, who's that white guy? Reverend Prude would say, that's Brother Dupree, and I watched Reverend Prude invite him to the pulpit. And the thing about Black people or people who go to church in general is that in our fellowships, as you go week after week, Sunday after Sunday, revival after revival, all these different occasions, we become familiar with each other as we worship together. So to see Reverend Dupree at the Martin Luther King service, or joining in our church services or different afternoon services, that's what a Christian community is. And so I think that, that idea of, like anybody, when you have a fellowship, if there's an outsider, someone new, you might ask a question who that is. But, hearts that are open by Jesus Christ are open to other people coming to gather at the fire also.
Thank you, Sean.
Amen.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Sean. And then again, like I said, we were under leadership, like you said, of Dr. Floyd Prude Jr. New Zion had longtime history with Reverend U.S. Pride, and there's a park named after him across town on Shore Drive across from Fairbanks Flats. And then Reverend D.W. Johnson was instrumental too with helping after Stevenson got here, that was working with the Fairbanks Flats and the YMCA. D.W. Johnson came along and he was very helpful too. I guess that balance, again, we had J.D. Stevenson, a white guy, then we had Reverend D.W. Johnson as a Black to kind of smooth things over and make it a team, teamwork approach, the Black church in the community. When all else fails, still to this day, you turn to the church. When things aren't going right, you turn to the church. When things are going good, you turn to the church. It's your spirituality that's leading and helping you along the way. I can just, as I'm speaking and thinking, I remember an old hymn too. It says, if it hadn't been for the Lord on my side, tell me where would I be? These are things that got our families through some of the toughest situations. And I find myself saying that. They said, the more you keep living, you'll understand. I didn't understand that stuff back in the day, but when they say keep living, you'll understand what it means when it says, if it hadn't been for the Lord on my side. Thank you, because I'll get going on that too. I guess I'm a little preacher.
We do have another comment in the chat. Somebody did send me a message saying, with everything being virtual right now, it's a great time to visit the Emmanuel Baptist or any other Black church on their Facebook pages. So if you want to kind of scope it out ahead of time, you could do that. And then Vicki, did you have another question or was your question answered?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, employment opportunities. And again, I appreciate you all. I know time is getting down and I'm going to keep going, but I'm a talker by nature. Y'all know again who my mom is. But employment opportunities. This was a quote strictly from the superintendent at Fairbanks. He told Mr. McCord when he was going, he said, get us some of the churchmen from Mississippi, good people, good men, and absolutely no gamblers. I thought that was kind of interesting. No gamblers, but bring them up here if they're going to be good workers. Most of the Black males that came, they came to work at Fairbanks. They came to work at Ironworks, the foundry. They worked on the railroads. Black females, they could only work as maids or become prostitutes. At that time, the city of Beloit hired no Blacks. There were no retail or office jobs available. A lot of the women stayed home and took care of the kids while their husbands and the dads were out in the foundry and coming back, filthy with all the smut and stuff from working in the foundries, which ended up having some detrimental that ended up being detrimental to some of their health, because they were inhaling those fumes for all those years. My grandfather worked at the foundry for over 40 years, and he ended up with something similar to COPD because they're, you know, day in, day out, they're working 12-hour days sometimes, breathing in all of those fumes. And if their family wasn't here, they were working to send money back home, back south, to, you know, so they could get their families here. They were here preparing. Like I said, you stayed under one roof. You took care of each other. There was, you know, females, again, just discredited or discounted, or sometimes when the husbands didn't want them putting themselves in those situations as maids and prostitutes. And that's why they just worked and the wives took care of home. Along with working, this kind of goes hand in hand with the housing inequalities. Here's a quote from John Woods. So, affordable housing brings stability, economic diversity, and improves the physical quality of the neighborhood. But Blacks weren't afforded those opportunities as much as being, you know, home owners and home ownership and nice houses to raise their families in. They were not allowed to purchase homes in certain areas of the city. One of the districts, school districts over Todd School District, if you wanted to buy a house in that area, there were clauses in the deeds that stated whites only, or no Blacks allowed unless Blacks were already, if there was a Black already living in that area, they could possibly bring one, but they didn't want more than 2 families in a 6-block radius. They didn't want more than 2 Black families in a 6-block radius. Black females, their income was not included in their husband's housing loan application. There were 2 places in Beloit that did give loans for housing. That was Beloit State Bank and Beloit Building and Loan Association. So, you know, so neighbors, you know, they were like counting, okay, it's already enough in this area. Again, that's how they ended up staying kind of segregated in the city, living in certain areas only. And that's kind of how it's mapped out even now, although there's placed sporadically throughout the city of Beloit, but still there, you know, there's certain areas, like they like to consider it the hood. And the hood being over in the Merrill neighborhood, I say from White Avenue up to about Henry Avenue, and that block radius, they consider that the hood. And where I'm from, we call it the neighborhood because I'm a product of that area. I grew up in the 1300 block of Wisconsin my whole life, and my mom is still there after 50 something years to you know, stay in that area. She never left that area, even that was her first house she ever had bought. And her income could have had her move to any area, but she chose to stay in that neighborhood because she wanted to be a role model for others in that neighborhood, to say you can be working. You know, when she moved in our 1300 block of Wisconsin, she was the second Black family on that block. And now it's majority African Americans. But again, she just was hoping that that would set the stage to show, you know, it's not, you know, where you're living doesn't define who you are or what you are.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. So Janet, you're first, please unmute and ask your question.
I'm with the League of Women Voters, working with the League of Women Voters about housing in Janesville. But one of the things we discovered is that there are still covenants that go along with some of the deeds in certain neighborhoods in Janesville. And I'm wondering how, are there still covenants, do you think, in the Beloit, in some of the Beloit white-owned deeds for their houses?
I haven't personally dealt with it, but I'm saying yes, Janet. Just off of experience that I've heard different people mention how they've been turned down for houses. Could be like one little minor glitch, but yet you could get a house over here with no problem. So I think those are the unspoken little clauses or whatever, is, you know, not directly as blatant, but I'm sure that they are still, again, trying to weed out their neighborhood and make sure that they have who they think fits a description of living in that area. So again, like I said, nothing, I just heard that through like friends, and I haven't done any research on it, but I'm sure that it still exists, but again, not as blatant, but those are those hidden secrets.
And they're illegal, but they're
Yeah.
still there.
Yep, and you just have to, what happens is you get scared and frustrated, and you're really just sometimes desperate, so you don't fight it. Because this is, again, a personal opinion. Once you start to fight and try to prove something, I think people get offended by that and feel that, you know, they're troublemakers, they're trouble starters. So no, this won't be a good fit for them in this neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from Santos saying, how long did it take the city to acknowledge the Open Housing Civil Rights Act of 1968? Do you know that off the top of your head, Miss Linda?
I've read, and I saw that, not right off the top, but I think it was around like early 70s, like early 70s when it finally started to, you know, kick up some noise in Beloit, late 60s, early 70s.
Okay, we have another message that says, I too am a product of the Merrill neighborhood. Everyone looked out for one another. We were a loving village of people and are still connected today by that love.
Yes.
Yes. So
I
don't know if
second
you wanted-
that.
I don't know if they wanted to be identified because it was a direct message to me, but please feel free to share that in the open chat if you want to be identified. And we have another question. I don't know if they want to type it out to me or if they want to ask. I don't want to identify you if you
Is
don't.
it me?
Yes, it's you.
Okay. No,
Go
it's
Jen.
just a comment. I just wanted to say I love the homes in the Merrill neighborhood. I'm a realtor, so if you have anybody that wants to go in any neighborhood, I am happy to fight that fight, and that's a huge hot point for me. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm not trying to drum up business. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just, it's so important, and I breach that subject every chance I get with fellow realtors. So.
All right, I'm going to jump in and interrupt. I am going to stop sharing my screen just temporarily. We will get right back. But we do want to honor our time agreements. So it is now 7. I will end recording. But Linda, if you are available to stick around and continue, I am certain that everyone who stays around for the parking lot would love to hang out with you and continue to ask more questions. But I just wanted to let everyone know that I am going to end recording.